In 1931, in the San Telmo neighborhood of Buenos Aires, Eduardo Ferrante, a small dry goods merchant, woke his clerk son Miguel at 6 in the morning and said one thing: "Don't go to the bank today." Miguel didn't listen. He read his father's words as that familiar old man fear that surfaced in every crisis, and by 8 in the morning he had taken his place in line. That afternoon, the doors of Banco de la Nación closed and never reopened. Eduardo reached under the counter that morning, pulled out gold coins from a tin box, quietly put them in his pocket and said nothing. Because he had already said it, history leads us to believe it has taught us this: those who hold cash win when crisis comes. But the truth is the exact opposite. Cash was found not in the hands of those who survived every major banking collapse, but in the hands of those who didn't. In every great financial catastrophe in history, the only thing that preserved real value was what the state had not promised, what the institution had not guaranteed, and what money could not replace. This is not coincidence. It is a mechanism. When John Law's Mississippi Company collapsed in France in 1720, two groups formed among Parisian merchants. One group held paper money, the livre issued through Law's system. The other group had not converted to paper despite Law's own recommendations, and had not let go of their old Louis d'Or gold coins. When the crisis hit, the paper currency was zeroed out within weeks. Those who held gold not only survived, they bought the properties of their collapsed rivals at floor prices. What draws attention here is Law's system itself, an unprecedented monetary policy, the first experiment in central banking, the first systematic spread of paper money. And precisely because of this, its collapse was so fast. The innovation was built on trust, and when trust disappeared, nothing remained. To see how trust can be an illusion, you need to look at 1890s Istanbul, in the final period of the Ottoman Empire. The Duyunuwu Mumiye administration had been established, a structure created to manage Ottoman external debt on behalf of foreign creditors. During this period, a large portion of Istanbul's Greek and Armenian merchant class saw Ottoman government bonds as a safe harbour, a paper value backed by the state. But the state had already gone bankrupt. Those who held the bonds lost both their wealth and their country in the decades that followed. Those who held tangible assets, land, property, precious metals, came out with at least something. This logic did not break down when the geography changed. In Hungary in 1944, during the final years of the war, the pengo entered the fastest hyperinflation ever recorded. Monthly inflation rates swung between 15,000% and 400 trillion%. Even saying the number becomes meaningless. Testimonies from Budapest of that period show this. Families who had gold jewellery or foreign currency were able to sustain their daily lives. Those who held pengo woke up each morning to find they had lost 80% of their money in a single day. The difference here was not simply holding hard money. It was understanding how quickly a state could sacrifice its own currency. A state's sacrifice of its currency does not have to be gradual. In 1983 in the Philippines, while the Marcos regime was under political pressure, Manila's middle class held deposits predominantly in pesos. When the central bank's foreign exchange reserves ran out, the government declared capital controls. Foreign currency accounts were frozen and forcibly converted at off-market rates. Those who held small amounts of physical gold or dollars at that time remained outside this grip, because the state could not control what it could not reach. This is the essence of gold's historical value, not its portability, but its institutional inaccessibility. When the Cyprus banking crisis erupted in 2013, it was a surprise to most European investors. 40% of deposits were cut, meaning the bank was rescued through what is called a bail-in, and depositors paid the bill. But in Cyprus there was a small group, mostly the second generation of wealthy island families, who had been converting portions of their deposits into physical assets since 2010. This group lived through the crisis, but the crisis did not erase their balance sheets. What is striking is this. These people had not foreseen the crisis. They had simply maintained their habit of moving from the abstract to the concrete. The reason all these examples arrive at the same conclusion is not luck or foresight. When governments take on debt, printing money is the easiest solution. Because raising taxes is politically costly, austerity meets social resistance. But hollowing out the currency often happens silently, its effect arriving with a delay. This delay dulls people's trust in the system, but also prevents them from leaving it, because daily life continues to function through that currency. The time between the loss of trust and the real loss is the window institutions use to extend their own lives, and when that window closes, those holding cash are already left behind. This mechanism compels a specific behavior. Value-preserving assets work not when people start carrying them at the moment they need them, but when they begin carrying them when they think they don't need them. When you want to buy gold at the moment of crisis, it is already too late. The spread has widened, inventory has thinned, and you're making decisions under psychological pressure. In historical examples, the survivors had not read the crisis. They had read the structure of the system. And that reading came not from the anxiety of something might go wrong, but from the observation that every system carries within itself a mechanism of erosion. From this observation follows another, the limits of diversification. People think of diversification in geographic or sectoral terms, different countries, different sectors, different currencies. But as seen in Cyprus, Hungary, and the Philippines, institutional diversification does not protect assets that remain on the same plane. Deposits held in fiat currency, regardless of which bank holds them, share the same vulnerability. Real diversification is stepping outside the system that the asset is subject to. And this distinction matters more than most people ever get the chance to learn, because by the time the lesson becomes visible, the cost of learning it has already been paid. And why is the idea of stepping outside the system ignored? Because there is a very large cost of nonconformity. Holding physical assets is impractical. It has insurance costs, storage costs, lower liquidity. The efficiency of modern life rewards full compliance with abstract financial instruments, and this reward makes the fragility invisible. Most people understand crisis in abstract terms, but make their daily decisions based on concrete rewards. This psychological split reconstructs the ground for history's greatest financial losses with every generation. But there is something else at work beyond mere practicality. Stepping outside the system also carries a social cost. The person who quietly converts a portion of their savings into physical gold is not celebrated. They are seen as paranoid, as old-fashioned, as someone who doesn't understand how modern finance works. The person who holds diversified ETFs and index funds across 3 continents is considered sophisticated. And in calm times, they are right to feel that way. The system rewards them consistently, visibly, year after year. The problem is not that they are wrong during the calm. The problem is that when the calm ends, the sophistication of their diversification means nothing if every piece of it lives inside the same institutional architecture. Complexity inside a fragile structure is still fragility. This also explains why the same pattern repeats across generations rather than being corrected. It is not that people fail to read history. Many do read it. But reading history in comfort produces a different conclusion than living through it. A person who studies the Weimar hyperinflation from a stable economy concludes, "I would have done differently." But that same person, embedded in a functioning system with monthly returns and digital convenience, faces a completely different set of daily incentives. History is read as a story about other people in other times. The mechanism it describes is experienced as a present reality only when it is too late to respond to it comfortably. There is one more pattern worth naming. In almost every case we examined, the warning signs were not hidden. The Ottoman government's insolvency was visible to anyone who looked at the numbers. The Mississippi Company's expansion was clearly unsustainable to observers at the time. Cyprus's banking sector was holding assets worth 8 times the country's GDP before the crisis. This was publicly reported data. The people who lost the most were not uninformed. They were informed and chose to remain inside the system because the system was still functioning, because their neighbours were still inside it, and because the cost of leaving felt higher than the risk of staying. This is not stupidity. It is a deeply human calculation, and it is precisely this calculation that every collapsing system depends on to buy itself more time. Today, central bank balance sheets have grown between 10 and 15 times compared to their pre-2008 size. The IMF, in its 2023 report, described global public debt stock as near historical peaks. Pilot projects for central bank digital currencies are ongoing in 37 countries. A common feature of these projects is that they aim to increase programmable control over money. During the same period, the global trend of central banks increasing gold reserves has continued steadily since 2010. These institutions say one thing out loud, but quietly do another. When Eduardo Ferrante's son Miguel came home empty-handed that day, he did not ask his father, "How did you know?" Because Eduardo didn't know anything. He was simply holding something, a value that didn't depend on anyone else's word. And that is the true secret of the only asset that survived every banking collapse in history. Not an institution's guarantee, but a structure that needs no institution's guarantee.